A savage throbbing gripped Ian Major's heart as he sat on the stool in the crowded bar. Every time he drew in breath, the weight of the world prickled the insides of his lungs with invisible needles. A wild and insistent buzzing flickered within his mind, and bitter memories found their way into his conscious thoughts. A soft kiss and prolonged eye contact. A picnic at the park last summer. Quiet whispers in the middle of the night. They tormented him silently. Listlessly, Ian gazed at the half-emptied bottle of sour ale that rested in front of him. A dozen people conversed around him, and music played over the speakers, but the sounds were muted. Ian just gazed at the bottle, as if waiting for the answers to questions that he dared not utter aloud. His soft blue eyes became flooded with tears, and he sniffled slightly. He tried to blink them back, but a couple of stray droplets started their trek down his cheek. Ian let out a small but profound sigh as he brought the bottle to his lips and leaned his head back. The sour swill didn't erase the longing for the sweetness of her kiss. One of the other patrons stepped up to Ian and clapped him on his back. The man was taller and skinnier than Ian. A short, brown, scraggly beard graced his face, complementing his larger-than-average nose. His name was Joshua Allen. "Hey, I know it sucks, man," Joshua said, "but this rough period will pass. You'll find someone way better than her. She doesn't know what she gave up." A small tinge of vexation festered on the edge of Ian's perception. Once more, he saw her face bathed in fresh morning light. She had usually woken up first, and she always watched him until he woke up too. Nearly every morning for the better part of a year, she was the first thing he saw when he opened his eyes. His bed was now barren and chilling. Before, every moment was a new adventure to be experienced, and now it was all just a battle to keep going. Ian took another swig of his sour ale. "No way, man. There's no one better than Vicky. I really messed up. I ruined the best thing to ever happen to me." He couldn't help but have his woe accentuate every word. Joshua gave him a small frown. "How did you mess it up? Seriously, man. You haven't given me a definitive answer on what you did wrong." "I don't know." Ian rested his forehead against the bar. "I must have done something, though. Otherwise, why would she have—" Acid pooled in the back of his throat. Joshua's voice came out in a small whisper that only he and Ian could hear. "Cheated on you? Left you for that other guy?" Ian sniffled again. "I don't know how I'm supposed to fix this." Joshua's arm wrapped around Ian's shoulder. "You're not supposed to fix this. You're supposed to learn from it, get over it, and move on with your life. Believe me, I know it hurts. But there's someone way better for you out there. Someone who's going to love you, appreciate you, and want you for the man you are." "But where is she?" Ian asked as he looked up at Joshua. A steady sphere of sadness danced in Joshua's eyes, but he smiled all the same. "I don't know, man, but I know she's out there. The best thing for you to do is take a deep breath, stop looking and focusing on finding her, and then she'll appear." He snapped his fingers when you least expect it. Ian scowled. "I'm so sick and tired of hearing that. Everyone tells me that. You'll find her when you're not looking. How is that fair? I'm a great guy and I have so much to offer someone. I just wish someone would give me a damned chance. But no one wants someone like me. They want assholes who treat them like shit." He lightly tapped the bar with his closed fist. "I just wish I could find the right one. I want her so badly." Some of the surrounding patrons beamed odd and disapproving stares at him. Joshua maintained his warm smile. "That, my friend, is the problem. You want it so desperately, so passionately, that you're driving away the thing you want the most. You have to chill out." A slender woman walked up to Joshua and wrapped her arm around his waist. Her long, blonde locks fell behind her head freely, and her blue eyes radiated with sympathy. She rested her head against Joshua's chest, but she reached out and lightly pinched one of Ian's cheeks. "He's right, you know," Jamie Angel said. "Women totally pick up on that stuff. It's okay to feel heartbroken, but you have a lot going for you." Ian sniffed a little, and his head buzzed due to the sour ale. "I do?" She nodded. You're handsome, incredibly sweet, and you're fun to talk to. She paused for a moment. You know what? I have a friend coming into town in a few days. She and I went to college together, and she's a wonderful person. I bet you two could really hit it off. She nudged him a little. You know, if you're still not being a sad sack of shit. For a brief moment, a light airiness whirled in Ian's chest, but his shoulders sank. His head drooped, and he finished off his sour ale. It had been his third one that night. The only woman I want is Vicky, Ian said, but she wants someone else. I'm going home. Ian moved to pull the keys from his pocket, but Joshua held his hand up. Joshua said, I'm driving you home, man. Ian opened his mouth to retort, but Joshua shook his head. You're broken-hearted, buzzed, and angry. Joshua poked him in the chest. This is not up for discussion. Now give me your keys. For a brief moment, a swelling of defiance took hold of Ian. It didn't last long, though, and he nodded. Jamie followed Joshua and Ian in her car, and neither man said anything the entire ride over to Ian's apartment. The silence started out as a soothing blanket, but the void of discussion left Ian open to wandering thoughts. A gentle grazing of the fingertips, a whispered, I love you, hugs that never lasted long enough. When they arrived at Ian's apartment, Joshua turned toward him. Hey, I know you're sick of hearing this, but it will get better. Good things come to those who wait. You just have to be a little more patient. Yeah. Ian grabbed his car keys and got out of the car. Thanks for being a good friend. I'm sorry I was being so stupid. Joshua smiled. It's not stupid to hurt. It's natural. Take the time you need, but then move forward. Text me tomorrow. Okay, Ian replied. Ian waved at Jamie and Joshua as they drove off, and then he climbed the stairwell that led to his second-story, two-bedroom apartment. Each step reminded him of the countless times where he followed her to their door, or she trailed him, talking about some such thing. He opened the door and stared into the home that, only a week prior, had two people living there. The air still carried her residual fragrance. Vague, ghostly echoes of her image moved through the empty apartment. Ian closed the door, locked it, and then moved to the bedroom. A lucid voice resonated in his mind, and the bitter notion that he would never hear her call his name again struck him like a hammer. Ian fell to the side of the bed, clasped his hands together, and said the Lord's Prayer. Once he was finished, he squeezed his closed eyes tighter. Why, O Lord? He sobbed as he spoke. What have I done that caused you to take her away from me? What transgression did I do to ruin the best thing to happen to me? I don't understand. Please help me to understand what I did wrong. I was loving, supportive, and I did everything a good boyfriend was supposed to do. Why must this always happen to me? How come I'm always the one cast aside? Please, oh God, have mercy on my soul. Please either let me fix this with Vicky. He paused for a long moment. Or please send me the woman I'm supposed to be with. Please send me someone whom I can truly love, and they will truly love me. Please, oh please. Ian performed the sign of the cross on his forehead, shoulders, and chest. As soon as Ian's head hit the pillow, a great weariness overtook him. His mind spiraled into darkness, and everything became numb. A dreamless blackness engulfed him for what seemed like ages, but then his eyelids slowly opened. The delicious whiff of something wondrous drew him from the death-like slumber he had been nestled in. Bacon. It was definitely bacon. Ian stared at the wall next to his bed, but something was off. A toy box full of never-before-seen action figures, race cars, and other such things sat against the wall. Bright-colored posters lined the room. Ian couldn't smell Vicky's fragrance anymore. Wafting alongside the scent of bacon was a mixture of dirty socks and Play-Doh. As he sat up, Ian recognized some of the symbols on the posters. Several muscle-bound men with WWE logos under their torsos stared back at Ian, daring him to question their manly might. The bed that Ian slept in had a race car plastic frame on the outside. The door to the room cracked open, and a pair of little eyes peeked at him. A small boy, probably about 5 years old or so, smiled at him. The child had brown hair, a pair of blue eyes, and a larger than normal nose for someone his age. Ian blinked and tried to get out of bed, and the child screamed out excitedly. The child pushed open the door and moved toward the toy box like a lion chasing its prey. A moment later, a man with brown eyes, a clean-shaven face, and a broad smile stepped into the room. His larger-than-average nose marked him. Ian stared groggily at the man. Joshua? Joshua grinned. Now that Ian gazed at his longtime best friend, he noticed several unique things. Bits of gray in his hair, more laugh lines around his cheek, and a more mature sparkle in his eyes. It also appeared Joshua had gained about 10 or 15 pounds around the midsection. "Sorry," Joshua said. "Did he wake you?" He turned to the little boy, who now held up a large T-Rex toy. "Jonah, what did I tell you about your toys?" Jonah smiled impishly. "You said I had to wait for Uncle Ian to wake up before I could play with them. I waited like I was supposed to." A small chuckle escaped Joshua's lips. "Why don't you take your toys into the living room? You only get to play for 30 minutes, and then we have to get ready to go." Joshua placed his hands on his hips and took on the same sort of authoritative stance that he often directed at Ian when Ian drank a little too much. "Okay." Jonah grabbed a large red pillow, a couple of wrestlers, and what looked like a Barbie from the toy box. He ran out of the room. "Who's the kid?" Ian asked. Joshua smiled. "I know, right? I used to think all that accelerated learning stuff Jamie put him through was too excessive. But in the end, I love that Jonah can express himself so coherently." "Wait." Ian stood up for the bed and rubbed his face. "He's yours? You have a son?" Joshua arched an eyebrow at him, but his delight seemed to grow more intense. "No, I just kidnapped a local street urchin, and I plan to start a sweatshop in the basement." Ian just stared at him, but Joshua gazed back, unblinking and unchanged. "Anyway," Joshua said, "come on, breakfast is ready. You have a big day ahead of you, and you'll want some energy, I'm sure." "A big day?" Ian asked. "What are you talking about?" "What am I talking about?" Joshua chuckled. "Always a kidder. Come on." Joshua left the room, and Ian had no choice but to follow. As Ian moved down the hallway, he noticed the pictures hanging on the wall. Joshua and Jamie were in all of them, which was to be expected. However, each picture displayed a memory that Ian had no idea about. When did they go camping? And was this one taken in Japan? Some of the pictures even had him in them, but Ian couldn't recall ever going to Vegas or the Christmas party where he had worn such an ugly sweater. The hallway eventually led into a living room that connected to a dining room and a kitchen. Little Jonah played on the floor with his toys, and the Barbie was beating up the wrestlers. Joshua gestured to the dining room table where a plate full of bacon, eggs, and hash browns awaited him. Ian sat down, but he stared at the meal. A full minute passed. Joshua frowned. "Is something wrong?" "Why am I here?" Ian asked. Joshua replied, "What do you mean?" "I assume this is your house, but why am I here eating breakfast?" Ian asked. A hearty laugh escaped Joshua. "Well, the girls wanted to use your place to get ready." Joshua paused. "Are you feeling okay?" He reached out and felt Ian's forehead. "You don't have a fever." "Get ready for what?" Ian asked. "I don't understand what's going on." He placed his head in his hands. Joshua clapped Ian on the shoulders. "If you remember, I felt the same way about my wedding. It sure does seem like a whole lot of hoopla over something that could be done in 5 minutes, right?" A loud bang came from the living room, and Joshua moved to where Jonah played. "Sorry," Jonah said. Joshua laughed a little. "What did I tell you about throwing your toys against the wall?" "But Stacy was asserting her dominance in a rapidly declining patriarchal society, and the men need to know their place," Jonah said. "I won't do it again, Daddy." "See that you don't." Joshua moved back into the dining room. In Joshua's absence, a great thundercloud had appeared in Ian's chest, and his soul twisted within him. "When you say wedding," Ian started. "Don't get me wrong," Joshua said. Today's gonna be awesome. It's just gonna be way more extravagant than my wedding was. I didn't mean anything by it. All of the moisture in Ian's mouth disappeared. His words came out a little raspier than what he intended. Who's getting married? Joshua barked out a laugh, but when Ian didn't join in, he sat down at the table. Are you feeling all right? You don't look well, Joshua said. Is it cold feet? You know you're ready for this. It's been a long time coming. Was it Ian's imagination, or did the colors drain from the world around him? I'm getting married today? Perhaps God had answered his prayer. To Vicky? Joshua's face contorted in a horrified, shocked expression. Don't let Celeste hear you say that, or you'll break her heart. He shook his head. Hell no, not to Vicky. Seriously, what's up with you this morning? You're not acting like yourself at all. That tequila last night must have really messed you up if you're thinking you're getting married to that hag troll instead of Celeste. Celeste? Ian asked. He licked his lips and delved deep into his mind. Never in his life had he ever met someone with that name before. Yeah, Celeste Montgomery, Joshua said. The love of your life, your soulmate? That ring a bell? He paused for a moment. Are you messing with me, man? A slight awkwardness overtook him, and Ian let out a bashful smile. Joshua grinned. Okay, I knew you were pulling my leg. You really are a lucky guy. She is the best thing that could have ever happened to you. Joshua went back into the living room to check on his son, and in his absence, Ian sat back in his chair. Every cell in his body radiated with a sense of numbness, and an ethereal fog drifted around him, muddling his synapses from firing properly. A sudden idea popped in his mind, and Ian felt at his sides. At the moment, he wore dark green sweatpants and a gray shirt. Hey, Joshua, Ian asked. Yeah? Joshua popped his head back into the dining room. Where's my phone? Ian stood up from the table. Joshua just shrugged. I'm guessing it's back at your apartment. A burst of annoyance flickered in Ian's heart. Why the hell is it there? He paused. Can I use your computer or something? Joshua's response was short and sweet. Nope. Why not? Ian's brows furrowed. Joshua laughed. The girls were very specific. You're not allowed to see the bride at all before it's time. Jamie told me I wouldn't get any for a month if I failed. As much as I love you, man, I have needs. Joshua ushered Ian back to his seat. Now eat. I already have to help Jonah get ready, and I would rather not have to baby you too. Don't make this harder on me. Ian sighed as he ate his breakfast. It had been quite delicious, and it did settle his quaking nerves a little. Throughout his meal, his mind kept prodding at the great mystery that now lay in his lap. Who was this Celeste? It didn't make any sense. He pinched his thigh and twisted, and pain radiated his senses. Okay, so this wasn't a dream. Could it be some kind of massive prank? No, that didn't make any sense either. Joshua would never play a practical joke on him like this, especially related to love. He knew how important finding true love was to Ian. Ian took his plate into the kitchen, washed off his plate, and then entered the living room. A moment later, Joshua exited the back hallways dressed in a tuxedo. His vest was a light blue-green color. Great, I was just about to come get you, Joshua said. I left your tux hanging in the bathroom. We only have 2 hours before showtime, so hurry up. 1,000 knots formed in Ian's stomach. 2 hours, Ian stammered. His fingers shook slightly, and a vile, messy, sick feeling overtook him. His breakfast nearly spilled past his lips. Joshua just grinned at him and pushed him back toward the bathroom. Ian allowed himself to be guided, and his legs stepped mechanically. His mind swirled in a frenzy, and for a long few moments, it was as if he were watching a video of someone else walking, rather than him actually doing it himself. The bathroom door closed behind him, and instantly, Joshua said, Really, dude? Why are you in your underwear? Ian's eyes fixated on the tuxedo hanging from the shower rod. Its black sheen seemed so mesmerizing, and the starkness of the white shirt made the entire ensemble that much more profound. Was that tux really for him? Was this really happening? Ian's heart thumped in his ears, and every breath had to be forcibly ripped from the air. He breathed so deeply and so rapidly that his lips vibrated slightly. A shock zapped into his skin when he reached out and touched the white shirt. Oh God, it was real! His stomach churned again like a nearly angered volcano. Ian licked his dry lips. This was the thing he had wanted all his life, but now that he was here, icy shackles of fear gripped his neck and wrists. Every time he moved to take the shirt off of the hanger, his limbs refused to comply. Ian was going to get married in 2 hours. No, not 2 hours. More like 1 hour and 49 minutes. A sudden snap went off in his mind, and Ian found the freedom to put on the shirt. It weighed down on his shoulders like a 5-ton truck. His mind went numb, and he just kept on putting on clothes until his hands reached out and touched nothing. Ian glanced in the mirror, and well, he looked marvelous. Never before in his entire life had he appeared more gallant. A sudden knock shook him from his staring. "Dude, are you done yet?" Joshua asked. A second later, he opened the door. Joshua's smile split his face. "You look great, man. Celeste is going to flip." "Celeste," Ian whispered. He turned back to Joshua. "Hey, let's play a game." Joshua replied, "You don't have time for a game, man." "Let's pretend I have sudden amnesia and I totally forgot everything about Celeste," Ian said. "Would you, as my best friend and best man?" He paused for a moment. Surely Joshua was his best man. Answer questions about her so I could learn about her? Joshua's smile fell away. "You're that nervous that you need reminders of why you love her?" Ian chuckled. "Okay, you got me. I have the coldest feet ever. Could you please humor me?" Joshua just shrugged, but then walked out of the bathroom. "You're going to have to ask me stuff while I finish getting Jonah ready." Ian followed him out, and they came upon Jonah dressed in a little suit. It was black, with a white shirt, just like Ian's and Joshua's. Jonah also had a blue-green vest. At the moment, Jonah was barefoot, though. "So ask away," Joshua said. Ian asked, "How did we meet?" "We met at Little Leaguer practice back in 3rd grade, Joshua said. "You were the new kid from California, and I was the cool guy back then." "Dude, you know what I meant." Joshua grinned. "You two met at Applebee's a few years ago." Ian waited for more to come, but Joshua focused on holding one of Jonah's feet in hopes to wrangle one of the socks onto it. "Okay," Ian said. "What's she like?" "Well, she's a 6-foot post-operation German trucker man with a love of show tunes and Metallica. She has a tattoo of a hippie riding a unicorn while shooting an assault rifle at a Republican lobbyist," Joshua said. Ian's eyes went wide, and then little Jonah asked a question. "Daddy, what does post-operation mean?" Joshua laughed a little. "It's a big boy joke. Don't tell your mother." Jonah grinned. "Can I have a cookie before we go?" "No," Joshua said. Jonah's delight grew larger. "Then I guess I'm going to have a story for Mommy." Joshua sighed, and he got up to go into the kitchen. He returned a moment later with a chocolate chip cookie, and he handed it to Jonah. "What's she really like?" Ian asked. Joshua replied, "She's down to earth, sweet, ambitious, and strikingly intelligent. You two get along so well, and she's able to keep you on your toes." Ian grinned. "And what does she do?" "She works with mentally handicapped kids in the hospital," Joshua said. "We have to go within 5 or 6 minutes. You have time for one last question." Ian swallowed hard, and his eyes became moist. "Does she really love me? Is she really the one for me?" Joshua didn't answer, but he gave Ian a smile born from pure magical fire. "It's time to go," Joshua said as he managed to get the last sock on Jonah's feet. Ian followed Joshua out of the building, and they came to Joshua's car. It had been the same car he had always had, only with a few more rust spots and signs of wear and tear. Once Jonah was secure in the back, Joshua drove while Ian rode shotgun. The car moved with moderate speed, and at the same time itself sped past Ian. The universe tickled the edges of Ian's senses. and he sat there in the passenger seat, silent. He stared out of the window, but not at anything in particular. Based on Joshua's responses, this was it. This was it. This was it. All that hoping, waiting, and praying had finally come to this. The car stopped, and Ian's eyes came into focus. A large stone cathedral-like church loomed in front of him with unspoken majesty. Radiant power wafted off of its structure, and a great force tugged at Ian, urging him to come inside. Ian's soul quivered violently, and no matter how much he urged himself to move forward toward the church, he remained stationary. "Hey, are you feeling any better?" Joshua asked. In the smallest voice possible, Ian whispered, "We're here. We're really here," Joshua said in a voice almost as hollowed as Ian's. "Yeah, the journey was hell, and I know there were times when despair almost swallowed you whole, but you kept on pushing. You kept on moving forward, and you two finally found one another. I know you're scared right now. It's natural." Ian glanced over at Joshua. "It is? But this woman is supposed to be the one I'm going to love forever. Why am I trembling inside?" "Because you're scared of messing it up," Joshua replied. Ian's gaze fell slightly. "I felt the same way, if you recall," Joshua said. "Your words gave me strength." "My words?" Ian licked his lips. "What did I say?" Joshua smiled. "It's okay to be scared. It's a sign that we're about to do something great and new. We're escaping the shackles of our past and emerging into a new adventure. Fear is fine, but don't let it hold you back from greatness. And you and Celeste, you're going to be great." He reached over and squeezed Ian's shoulder. "You said that about me and Jamie." A great silence lingered in the car, and even Jonah watched in amazement. "I really said that?" Ian asked. Joshua nodded. "You're a great guy. You're smart, sweet, and you're going to make an excellent husband. The hard work is already over. You got her to say yes. Now all you have to do is march in there and say I do." Ian laughed. "Oh, is that all I have to do?" Joshua chuckled a little too. "Are you ready?" Ian opened his car door and stepped out. The cool breeze whisked past him and kissed his cheek. "I suppose I am." The church stood impassively, and yet Ian felt the smile coming from the building. It had been waiting here for a long time, patiently and without apprehension. Unseen scarves of destiny gently wrapped around Ian's spirit. A blue sedan with strings and tin cans stretching off of its bumper was parked in front of the church parking lot. The words, "Just Married," were painted across the back windshield in white shoe polish. A procession of finely dressed people moved from the parking lot towards the entrance of the church. Ian recognized half of the people who strolled along, and everyone beamed warm, delighted expressions at him. Immense warmth churned within his skin like freshly made Amish butter, and the nervousness that had throttled him before fizzled into the depths of his forgotten mind. Joshua led him inside to a small room at the front of the church. As soon as Ian entered the room, he paused and gazed at the 6 other men dressed in tuxedos. In turn, he focused his attention on each of them. His cousin Kevin, a friend from college named Greg, Jonathan, who was Joshua's little brother, Patrick, a friend from that brief stint where Ian helped in a Rocky Horror Shadowcast, and the last 2 were people he had never seen before. Obviously, they had become important in his life since they were in his groom's party. Each of the guys in turn smiled, greeted Ian, and gave him encouraging words. They settled down around a table, and Patrick pulled out Cards Against Humanity from a backpack. After a couple of hands, Kevin and one of the new guys started talking about politics, so Ian turned his attention to the stained glass window to his right. Joshua nudged him. "Hey, are you okay?" Ian kept his words low, but as soon as he spoke, the other groomsmen locked their stares on him. Despite the fact that he was now the center of attention, Ian still kept his volume soft. "What if I'm making a big mistake?" Ian asked. Some of the other guys chuckled, but no one showed any visible concern. "Do you love her?" Joshua asked. Ian's eyes widened. What? Without a change in cadence or tone, Joshua asked again, "Do you love her?" A great foreign beast awoke within the depths of Ian's soul, and it danced about in a bewildering fashion. Did he love her? Surely he must love her if he found himself on such an auspicious day. Unfortunately, the moments that had built and refined that love were a complete mystery. Ian had skipped over them, and without their reinforcement, could he know for sure that he loved her? For as long as he could remember, Ian had prayed to skip to the good parts, the juicy, happy ending that his spirit longed for. Now that he was here, Ian couldn't help but stand amidst the revelry, unquenched by the enormity of it all. Without living through the brightest and best moments, could he really appreciate this victory? Ian licked his lips, which were as dry as a desert lizard's scales. Could he really appreciate this victory without knowing the trials and struggles that led him to that Applebee's, where he met the woman of his dreams? Could he truly know the sweetness of her kiss if he didn't embrace a void in his life that lacked such tender treasures? Was skipping to the good parts cheating him in the long run? Time stood still, and in that prolonged moment of reflection, no one said anything. No one moved, and they just waited for him to give them an answer. Did he love her? The more that Ian thought about it, the more his mind felt like a clenched fist. Ian relaxed, and a great stream of cooling magic flowed over him. Words dripped past his lips, and it took a moment for him to realize he was the one who spoke. "Yes, I love her. Very much." As soon as the words became born into creation, every nerve ending tingled with an absolute sense of goodness. "Then you're not making a mistake," Joshua said. A soft knock cut off all conversation, and everyone whipped their attention to the door. It opened. A kindly old man with super bushy eyebrows peeked inside. He wore the elegant robes of a priest. "It's time, son," the priest said. "Make your final preparations, and then meet me at the end of the aisle." Ian's stomach sank deeper into his body, and every breath required extreme effort. Strangely, though, Ian smiled and stood up with a quickness that surprised the other guys. Was Ian nervous as hell? Yes. Was this the biggest risk he had ever taken? Yes. Was he scared, though? No. No, he wasn't. Ian moved out of the room and entered the large main chamber of the church. All of the pews were packed. When he had first walked in, the guests spoke among themselves, and wild electricity soared on the air. However, as Ian moved down the aisle, a great hush fell over the crowd. Invisible hands pressed upon him, but they didn't push him into the floor. No, they gripped his shoulders, and invigorating energy filtered into him from countless sources. He positioned himself at the front of the aisle, beside the priest, and he turned to the crowd. Hundreds of smiles flashed his way, and double the amount of eyes drilled into his mortal coil. Ian glanced at one of the aisles and saw his family on the front row. His parents sat beside Ian's little brother, Isaiah. His heart nearly stopped when he glanced at Celeste's side and saw the people in the front row. An older woman sat next to a younger man dressed in a Marine's uniform. She had an average body type, a pair of stunning green eyes, and a visible strength displayed in her stance. "Hey Joshua," Ian whispered. "Tell me, in your opinion, does Celeste take after her mother?" Joshua chuckled. "Yeah? Why do you ask?" A sense of relief caressed Ian's insides. Oh, I was just wanting to hear your opinion. Ian turned his attention to the statue of Jesus Christ nailed to the cross. In the depths of his mind, he prayed, "Even though I don't know her, please let me be a good man for her. Please let me be strong enough to support her, wise enough to appreciate her, and humble enough to let her support me. Please let me be—" Soft music resounded out, and a great thunder rumbled within the crowd. All at once, everyone, including Ian, turned their attention to the back of the church. A pair of flower girls dressed in white dresses skipped down the aisle, and they dropped petals at their feet. Jonah followed them about 30 feet back, and he balanced a pair of rings on a plush, square purple pillow. The little boy's face was contorted in extreme concentration, and he meticulously marched on the petal-covered aisle. No one seemed to mind, especially not Ian. Ian's groomsmen started trailing up the aisle alongside bridesmaids that Ian had never seen before. Well, all except for the maid of honor. Jamie walked up the aisle by herself since Joshua was up on the altar with Ian. Her hair had grown out longer, and she had more laugh lines along her mouth. She was also like 8 months pregnant too. Each of the bridesmaids and maid of honor wore light blue-green dresses. Jamie grinned at him, and it was the kind of grin that said, "I told you so." The soft music died away, and 2 people stood at the far end of the aisle. Ian's soul twisted within him, and his eyes became moist. The man was tall, barrel-chested, and had a small, tight line for a mouth. He looked incredibly intimidating in his Marine uniform, and dozens of badges and pins covered his jacket. The man's gaze locked with Ian's. He didn't smile, but a quiet respect radiated from his hard, steely eyes. A woman dressed in white clung to his arm. A thick white veil concealed her face. As soon as Ian saw her, he knew. He really did love her. She was curvy and adorably cute. Somehow he just knew they had the kind of relationship where they could order a whole large pizza, watch an entire season's worth of a Netflix show while cuddling, and then go hiking the next day. She was the kind of person that loved and accepted him for all of his quirks. And Ian knew without any doubts that he found her quirks enchanting. Indescribable warmth overtook him, and it was so intense and comforting that Ian had never experienced it before, not even with Vicky. Everyone else in the entire church, even the burly, scary man at Celeste's left, faded away like smoke. No one existed aside from them. She moved closer to him, and all of the hidden splendors of the universe emerged around them. He had finally made it. He was here. No, not he. They were finally here. Everything came back into perspective when the priest asked, "Who gives this woman away?" Celeste's father's deep voice boomed. "Her mother and I do, with our blessing." Celeste's mother nodded affirmatively. Her father took Celeste's hands and kissed them softly before handing them to Ian. The old man smiled, and it took a moment for Ian to understand why. Tears trailed down Ian's cheeks continuously. He sobbed as he took hold of Celeste's hands. Her fingertips wrapped around his, and a spiritual melding began to unfold between them. Ian stared hard into the veil. It still obscured much of her features, but he could tell she had 2 eyes, a nose, and the barest hint of a smile. Suddenly, someone nudged his shoulder. Joshua cleared his throat. The crowd laughed softly. The priest even chuckled a little. "I said, do you, Ian Majors, take this woman to be your lovely wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" Ian didn't hesitate. "I do." While his response had surprised him for a moment, in reality, he had been moving toward this point in time ever since his birth. It might have taken longer to get here than he would have liked, but he finally got here. Never in his life had he spoken 2 words that carried so much urgency, expectation, and hope. The priest said, "And do you, Celeste Montgomery, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, till death do you part?" The universe itself froze in anticipation for her response. Time shook with discomfort, for it hated to be halted. Ian dared not breathe for fear of frightening her off. While he was trapped in suspension, his mind raced. What if she says no? What if she realizes she could find someone better than I? What if I'm not good enough? "I do." Her voice came out as softly as an autumn breeze. As impacted as Ian was by his own words, Celeste's 2-word combo sent him into a daze. The priest had been speaking, but the words had become muddled in the backdrop of existence, at least until he said, "You may now kiss the bride." Ian's eyes whipped to meet the priest's. "Really?" His voice resonated with over 2 decades worth of hunger and yearning. Joshua barked out a loud guffaw, and Celeste chuckled behind her veil. The priest gave Ian a grandfatherly grin. "Of course, my son. You might want to lift the veil, though." Ian took his hands from Celeste's, and he reached out to the veil. The air crackled wildly, and even though the veil was most likely made from silk or something, it felt like iron. Celeste stared into his eyes, unhidden. Her face was more round than narrow, and a lovely smile lay centered between her cheeks. Emerald eyes shimmered with vibrancy and vitality, and they drank his soul quite deeply. She had brown hair, and it had been expertly crafted into twirls, spirals, and other such things. To say that Celeste was beautiful would be like saying the ocean was big. She was wonderful, perfect in every way. She tilted her head slightly. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Ian closed his eyes and leaned in. Immense joy swirled all around him, and for the first time in a long time, Ian knew that everything was going to be great. Ian opened his eyes. He wasn't in a church surrounded by loved ones, nor was he in front of the love of his life. Ian was in bed, in his 2-room apartment, and he wore the same clothes he had worn to the bar the night before. Ian sat up. "Celeste?" No answer. Tears filled his eyes. "Celeste!" Silence. Ian's heart clenched savagely, and every nerve ending raged with anger. It hurt to breathe. Hell, it hurt to exist. He sobbed on his pillow, and he slammed his closed fist against the bed over and over. "Why?" Ian screamed out. "Why show me that? It's not fair." Rather than answers, Ian found a quiet apartment. The next couple of days passed by, and each minute felt saturated in a thick, hazy fog. Food did little to console the mangled scar that had been etched upon Ian's spirit, so he ate very little. Sleep came in brief patches, and no matter how many times Ian asked, his dreams never contained Celeste's visage. It wasn't until Jamie and Joshua barged into his apartment and dragged him out that Ian even had human contact at all. If Jamie hadn't been so insistent, he wouldn't have shaved or showered either. Joshua drove, Jamie sat up front, and Ian sat in the back. He hadn't asked where they were going, and to be honest, he didn't care. The car stopped, and Ian finally looked outside at the large, brilliantly lit sign. Applebee's. Cracks split upon Ian's heart, and he had to hold back the tears. The last thing he needed to do was break down in front of his 2 best friends. "Can we please go somewhere else?" Ian asked. "I hate Applebee's." Joshua grinned. "Since when? You love this place." Before Ian could respond, Jamie turned around and pointed a slender index finger at Ian's face. Her bright red painted nail nearly stabbed Ian in the nose. "No, we can't go somewhere else," she snapped. "I told my friend we were meeting here, and so we're meeting here." Jamie's eyes drew harder. "I love you, my dude, but your sad sack routine is pissing me off. Now when you meet my friend, you're going to be nice, and you're going to be happy, or I'm going to punch you in the dick. Do I make myself perfectly clear?" Ian's eyes opened wide. "Yes, ma'am." Jamie looked away, and Ian couldn't help but mutter under his breath, "I feel so badly for Jonah." "What was that?" Jamie asked. Nothing," Ian replied. "That's right, nothing." Jamie got out and closed the door behind her. Joshua didn't get out of the car right away. He looked at Ian through the rearview mirror. "I heard what you said," Joshua said in an uncharacteristically chilled tone. Ian winced. "Sorry, man. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful." "No, it's not that," Joshua said. "You said you feel bad for Jonah. Who's Jonah?" Ian licked his lips. "It's just, I had a weird dream where you had a son named Jonah, that's all." Joshua chuckled. "Come on," Jamie said. "Let's go." She stomped toward the Applebee's entrance. Joshua opened his door, but he didn't get out. "I like the name Jonah." He paused for a long moment. "Like, a lot. It's just so funny." "Really?" Ian asked. "Why?" Joshua turned around and stared dead center into Ian's eyes. "Jamie's pregnant. We were struggling to find a name. We have a girl's name picked out, but we couldn't decide on a boy's name." A deep silence drifted between both men. "Let's get in there before Jamie gets even more pissed," Joshua said. Ian got out of the car and he followed Joshua inside. A strange twisting started to take hold of his insides, and it felt as if Ian were about to cliff jump into a lagoon far below. When Joshua and Ian got inside, Ian noticed something. Jamie was already seated at a four-top table, and she wasn't alone. A brown-haired woman with a curvy body, a more round than narrow face, dazzling green eyes, and a wide smile engaged Jamie in conversation. The floor dropped out from under Ian's feet, and yet he floated magically. As soon as they got to the table, Jamie locked gazes with Ian. Jamie said, "Ian, this is my friend Celeste. We went to college together." She gestured toward Ian. "Celeste, this is my friend Ian." Celeste's eyes drifted up and met his own. Silence. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and 1,000 spheres swirled in the depths of her irises. Jamie swatted Ian in the chest. "Say hi, loser." Ian chuckled. Hi." Celeste blushed a little. "Hi." Another long moment of silence lingered before Celeste pointed at him. "Okay, this is going to sound strange," she said, "but I had the weirdest dream, and I'm pretty sure you were in it." Ian sat down beside her. "Oh, really?" A great warmth spilled out from some unknown region of the cosmos, and it filled his soul with liquid destiny. "Why don't you tell me about it?" The end.